Hello, hello, men, women, children, reindeer. We are locking in today for the Westcliffe Climb. We are just about a week away from this beloved celebration, Christmas Day, of course. I am here with the man, the myth, the legend. Almost, he's rivaling Santa Claus, quite possibly. Now that maybe that's too much. That see there, I overshot it, didn't I? I did it.
You did. You did.
Nevertheless, I love
But
the guy, Dr. Paul Looney. Here he is.
but I was born on Christmas Day, so there you go.
Get out of here.
True story.
Okay. Well, then I
It was,
revise. I revise it then. Okay. You and
yeah,
Santa.
it was a Sunday. My dad was a preacher. I was born at a minute after noon, and he actually preached that morning and made it to the hospital just before I popped out. So there you go.
Born on a Sunday to a preacher on Christmas Day.
Yeah, and
That's
I was born in Ranger, Texas, the only baby in the hospital, so I was kind of the lone ranger, right?
okay. This should be is this a country song that I don't know about somewhere? Did someone write this story? I'm the only baby in the hospital. Get out. This is wow. Okay. Well, I don't even know where to go from there. You almost derailed me there with all that new and exciting information. That being said, this is it's supposed to be a joy-filled time of year. I think it provides that. I think it also gives no shortage of stress and
Yeah,
pressure and craziness, and that is beginning to get ratcheted up as well. And so,
sure.
why don't you give us some insights, your wisdom here on navigating the stresses and pressures this time of year? Go ahead and hit us.
Well, God, Josh, is always ready to surprise us, and one of the things about celebrating Christmas at this time of year is that it is when the days are shortest and the nights. It's when we find ourselves, if we struggle with depression at all, um, vulnerable to feeling down because of those long nights and short days, and for Jesus to be celebrated at a time when we're vulnerable to distress, distraction, disappointment, and pain is really such a beautiful example of how God purposes to shine light, particularly in dark places.
Hmm.
Let those who've been in darkness um, be delighted by the light that they see. And so we had this juxtaposition at Christmas of darkness and light, of despair and hope, of devastation and renewal. And so the birth of a baby, and even birth, I always heard when I was growing up that the birth of a baby is a beautiful thing. Well, I did a rotation in OB-GYN and saw babies being born. No, it's messy. Like it's painful. It's kind of gross, but out of all that agony of labor and the blood and the mess comes this precious new life. And the Christian faith really is about God showing up in the most unlikely ways. And so I think for us at Christmas, we do have to look for God to show up in the midst of our mess and in the darkness, and especially in those moments when we cannot buy the gift for our child that we desperately want to buy them, or we cannot be with the person that we love because of uh, factors that are beyond our control,
Yeah.
distance or finances or whatever. And so there's this big juxtaposition between what we wish for and long for at this time and what we actually need to embrace as God's good provision. To find joy in a dark time is especially challenging, and that's where again the star of Bethlehem shows up for us in the night sky if we look for it.
I mean, that's such an interesting point that if for those of us that have means, we're able to provide for our families, our kids, whatever they would like for Christmas. We can make every wish and dream come true, though those folks are few and far between. Then there are others of us who may not be able to do that, but we have everyone around us that we could ever want. All of our parents and siblings, and everybody's healthy and fine. What I feel like you're touching on is an interesting nerve in that there is such potential for, even if we can buy everything in the world, maybe we can't buy ourselves more time, or maybe we can't bring that person back. If we have all of the people around us, maybe there's some other financial stress or pressure. So we're kind of set up almost no matter where you're at on either end of that scale of wanting something that can't be provided in this life, which is perfection and eternity and plenty of
Yeah,
time and everybody around you. It always falls short somewhere. I feel like that's what kind of what you're touching on here.
yeah, yeah. Well, grief is a part of living in a fallen world. We all, I may have said this before on the podcast, but it's like we all have a memory of Eden where things were right, where relationships were simple and sure, where we could be completely vulnerable and completely safe. And so, at a time like Christmas, when there's so much longing to reclaim that feeling of home, that feeling of joy and peace, that it is inevitable that our expectations will be dashed at times when something will happen that derails even the best laid plans.
Mm,
And when we have to then find a way to refocus and reclaim the joy of Christmas, which came in that first Christmas evening in a dark stable, probably on a cold night, when there was no room for refuge in a hospitable inn. There was only a bed of straw surrounded by manure, and
right,
other
right,
things.
right. So what do you find in your practice? Where are people at that you end up dealing with right on the other side of Christmas? What is it you find seems to pop up most often right on the other side of right on the other side of Christmas that people are dealing with? What does that sound like, look like, feel like?
Well, ironically, I think probably it's the leading up to that's as hard as the aftermath. We
Ah,
often it's often the unknown, and you know, God has carried us through difficult times in the past, but we always question, well, can He carry me through this? And but so that people who have lost a loved one at Christmas time, or who know they cannot be with their family at Christmas, there can be a sense of dread, which after they get on the other side of Christmas can dissipate. But to your point, there are some people who after Christmas do have a letdown or a crash, particularly if Christmas did not come off well,
mm,
particularly if they were unable to accomplish what they wished for their family. And and any time that the days are short and the nights long, we see an uptick of depression and
right.
anxiety. And so, yeah, people will come with some sense of grief about their losses. And for people who lose a loved one on Christmas Day or right around there, talk about a deflator of joy and robber of hope. Those kinds of losses can be very tough to overcome.
Wow. And just real quick, Pastor Mark, thank you for checking in with us, brother. We're glad to have you on board this morning. What do you see about what about folks who seem to navigate this time well? Do you see any characteristics that are consistent? Do you see anything in their mindset? Do you see anything in their perspective, in the way that they're processing this time of year, that seems to come out and rise up within the healthiest of us? What does that look
Sure.
like?
Well, one thing that we can do is to acknowledge our expectations. To really say, yeah, yeah, I want it to be perfect. To admit that we have this picture perfect family gathering, opening the
Right.
gifts, that's going to be perfect. Just acknowledge it, and even you can even ask God for it. He tells us to ask, but then along with the acknowledgement, we need to accept that it ain't going to be everything we wish it to be,
Right.
and to be willing to grieve the losses. If you get a last minute call, we thought we were going to come, but we can't make it.
Hmm.
To be able to find acceptance and to trust that whatever does show up is what God will use to his advantage. If you think about the expectation of Joseph and Mary when they're going to have a baby, like, yay, it's going to be awesome. And then they get bad news from the
Yeah.
political arena that says, you got to go to your town of origin,
Yeah.
Bethlehem. Are you kidding? Like, right at the time the due date is happening. And so it's a shoe in the works. It's a wrench in the plans that God uses to fulfill his prophecy about Jesus' birth in Bethlehem, to position Jesus where he needs to be for those who receive him, both the shepherds and the wise men.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. I guess when I was to apply some of your insights, even my own family, number one, this is the 32nd year that I have not gotten a remote control airplane or helicopter. Okay. I've been waiting on that for 32 years. It's yet to show up under the tree. Okay. So that was the first thing that hit me. The next thing was I remember the time that I went into my parents' closet by accident and recognized the handwriting from Santa. And then I was like, that's the same kind of cursive my mother uses. And so I remember that whole veil of lies
Oh,
crashing down, and so then what I just, like, so all I'm trying to say is it can hit us all at different times, like kind of a gradual reality check that it's not gonna do what we thought it's gonna do, or it's not gonna come through. And then we all kind of go through a little bit of that as the veil gets pulled back as to what
yeah.
was reality. I know for some of our family gatherings, I went into them like, okay, well, there's somebody's gonna end up yelling, and maybe an ornament or two might get thrown. I don't even know. And if it didn't happen, I was like, well, this was solid Christmas.
Well, that goes back to acknowledging and accepting that, that as much as we wish for, a holly jolly Christmas, um, it may not happen. And the ability to roll with the punches and to believe that God is at work in everything for good, and that it is the state of your heart that allows you to embrace the value of the season, to breathe in um, what God brings into your experience, to breathe in deeply of the birth of Jesus, the presence of friends and family, to breathe in the gifts of the season, the food, the ornaments,
Yeah.
the music, and to believe that that God showing up in a surprising way in that little manger is what we look for. We're looking for God to show up in a surprising way. We have our plans about how He's going to show up on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve and this Christmas Eve service, and we should orchestrate things to the best of our ability. But to believe that if we're attuned, if we're willing to let God be God, there will be um, gifts of the Magi. There will be
Yeah.
gifts that show up in a amazing way that really give us that sense that God not only is on the move in this moment, but He's been preparing something for us that will bless us.
That is so true. And it is so interesting how culturally, whether people are followers of Jesus or not, that there is a side to this time that seems to bring out the very best in us, which is usually people who are giving of themselves, giving of their time, giving freely of their gifts. And yet the tremendous irony is, for as followers of Jesus, it's centering around a person who would go on to say, I did not come to be served, but to serve, to
Mm.
give, to pour myself
Yeah.
out. And it's so interesting that culture just seems to, we all become a little bit more generous. Okay, I'm going to let you go ahead and have the lane in front of me. It's Christmas. I'm going to go ahead and donate to this. It's Christmas. So it's
Yeah.
interesting how that's so pervasive in our culture that it'll bleed in even to folks who are like, I don't know, I don't really get into Jesus, the whole Christian thing, but it seems to still put an imprint on our culture. I've always found that to be interesting.
It is very cool, and it's really quite remarkable that, as Jesus says, "A little leaven leavens the whole lump," and we're either going to be a force to leaven the expansiveness of the kingdom, or we're going to be leaven that taints the lump. Um, Thankfully, we still have enough of that lovely leaven of heaven that it does kind of work its way through the dough, and
Yeah.
it's pretty cool in spite of all the commercialism and all the you know focus on stuff. You're right. There's still uh, that sweetness where people are more open, generous, loving,
Yeah.
kind.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Want to remind you guys as you're listening to us as well, feel free to text us, hit us up here on our platform. We'd love to interact with you, answer your questions, talking about the craziness, stress, pressure, the good, the bad, the gifts, the ugly of Christmas. One of the things that really intrigued me is just the idea of the gifts that were brought to Jesus, and as I've been doing more preparation for my sermon series and everything else, and been trying to really study this thing from less of a westerner's perspective and more from somebody from like an eastern culture.
Yeah.
It's been so intriguing to kind of blow up my own paradigm. For I had to blow up my own paradigm first before I destroy my church's paradigm of Christmas time. And it's just this idea of like, wow, okay, so if it came from the east, that's quite possibly Persia, probably a 1,000-mile journey. They
Wow.
probably didn't just have just a few little coins like, "Here, good luck, kid. Best of luck to you." I'm sure if the king would have had to sign off on it himself, so I'm sure he wanted to be generous.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be gold, frankincense, and myrrh, and a lot of it, there would have been military protection. There would have been you would have had to stop several times. So I think to imagine a massive caravan,
Mm.
we have those little
Yeah.
pictures. It's always like the silhouette of three guys on a camel, holding their little box. And they had to protect. They had to have protected that. They would have had to have stopped and made preparations. There's servants involved. You could bet it's a 70 to 100 at a minimum caravan. That's what we see in the
Mm.
Middle East to these to this day with Bedouins and folks that move about throughout the Middle East are always really big caravans. So the thought that something would have traveled that far
Mm.
and the gifts themselves are so important. You have
Yeah.
frankincense. Frankincense is burned even in temple worship to this day in India.
Oh wow.
So, and the Catholic Church burns millions of pounds of it a year, so frankincense is saying he's a priest. Here it
Mm.
is.
Mm.
Myrrh is a healing agent. They use that in India to this day. You can rub it on your body, you can ingest it. Huge healing properties, and that's saying he's a healer. Here he is. This guy's a healer. Well, then
Nice.
then they show up with the gold, and the gold is quite literally saying he's a king.
Mm. Wow.
So I just can't imagine this
Yeah.
massive caravan rolling into town and what the implications of that would have been.
Now, do we think was he still in Bethlehem at that time? Or do we think he was in Nazareth by that point?
Okay, this is hilarious because it talks about them going to the temple. But the
Yeah.
problem is from a Western culture, we have to crush the whole story into one night because that's when everybody shows up to church.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then pastors preach about Jesus being at the temple the next Sunday, but no one's there. Not even the ushers are there, right? You have to have the fill-in praise band even show up. Like no one's there but the pastor and like seven people. So then he talks about the temple, but no one pays attention. No one's there. Well, at the end of that temple discussion, when he's presented, it says that they head back to Nazareth.
Mm.
So I think the Magi either caught them en route to Nazareth
Mm.
or they literally met him in Nazareth. I don't
Interesting.
think I don't think he's in Bethlehem at that point. And you can imagine. I mean, this is what I love about how Jesus would come to this earth. He could have come any way, call his
Yeah,
shot, could have made it work.
yeah.
I think it's so intriguing that he would come in such a scandalous fashion that would forever apply to all of us. He would come through a teenage, unwed, single mother, a family history and tree. If you look at it, it is wicked and bad and evil, no future, no prospects. I mean, think just put all that into context. And then on top of that, the whole town of Nazareth, yeah, right. We're sure God is the father. Okay, right? So Joseph just looks like some kind of a punk, I'm sure, that's just following this lady around wherever she wants to go. They leave, and if this happens the way I think it did, if the Magi show up in Nazareth, if you already despised this family before,
Mm,
now go ahead and throw some gold on top of it.
mm, yeah,
So I just think it's so interesting the dynamics of
mm,
all of that and what that says about us and what that says about this time of year. And I don't know. I just love
yeah,
how
yeah.
God interrupted human history in that way.
Sure. Yeah. Now, as we're talking about, I'm remembering that didn't when the wise men went to Herod, didn't they direct them to Bethlehem?
Well, this
Because
is what's
that's
interesting.
where that's where the slaughter of the babies happened.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
as I remember now, wasn't that where they were when the angel encouraged them to flee into Egypt?
What this is what's interesting is Herod asks, what's the prophecy?
Yeah,
So they repeat the prophecy. This is where the child will be born.
yeah.
They gave him the prophecy. And these little words that we just skim right over. They go back outside and it indicates in scripture the star starts moving again.
Hmm.
So all Herod knows is okay. He doesn't know that the prophecy's been fulfilled. It's done. This is where he was born. He didn't ask any other questions. So where do you think they are now? They didn't. He didn't ask. So yeah, he goes right back to Bethlehem. That's where you see the death of the innocents, all kids 2 years of age and under. Because by the time the Magi show up, I don't know if you've ever caught this, and I didn't for years. They don't use the word inn. They use the word house.
Mm.
When he's born, he's in an inn. When
Yeah,
they show up, he's in a house. I
yeah.
just think it's so interesting. Now, here's the thing, right? The kind of stuff you and I are talking about is not heaven or hell. It's not. But it's interesting to imagine like how this would have looked and
Mm.
you know, so if you're out there listening to me and you're like the Magi absolutely showed up at Bethlehem, Pastor Josh, you're a nut. It's really okay. We're both going to meet up in heaven. It's fine. I just think the little nuances of scripture when you read that, it leaves some things open to interpretation. It leaves some things open to possibilities that are so interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I love the idea of gift giving and the Magi um, bearing their gifts from afar. I mentioned acknowledging and accepting the expectations and the reality, breathing and believing um, that God will show up in even in the most abject of circumstances.
Yeah.
The third thing that if you think of A, B, and C's, the third thing that I encourage people is just care and connect. And you brought this out when you said that you see that at work in people's hearts to be more
Mm.
generous, to be more open, to be more loving. And the Magi really, for all of us, I think, demonstrate the power of a thoughtful gift.
Yeah.
And I love how you've outlined for us the sentiment that was imbued or invested in those three gifts.
Yeah.
The idea of being a priest, a healer, and a king. And I think one of the powers that we have in our gift giving and in the gifts that we give through relationship is calling out the best in those that we love and giving them gifts that reflect who they are
Yeah.
uniquely. And I had never thought about it, but that's kind of what the Magi were calling out something that they saw in the Christ child. And so, as we think
Wow.
about Christmas this year, one of the things we can think about is how can I give a gift that will hit the mark in um, empowering the person I'm giving to be all that they can be, to be what they're made for, as Jesus was
Wow.
made to be those things.
That's awesome. I mean, what you're calling people to is thoughtfulness in what you're going to give, and also like the identity, the better nature, the better parts of their identity and personhood, and how do you speak to that through a gift?
Yeah,
That is,
yeah.
I didn't think of that either. So I'm going to steal that for Sunday with your
You
permission.
should. You should definitely do it, and you don't have to credit me because it's just one of those things that popped into my head while I was thinking about the Magi and how their gifts called out the essence of who
Yeah.
Jesus came to be. I think that's such a cool idea. So
Well, all it means is right when I make that point, we're just gonna have a quick, like, half a second blip of your face, like a subliminal message that'll pop up on our screen, and people really won't be
No,
sure, like, what happened, but they'll just have
no.
this guy with with, long hair, slicked back, and glasses smiling real big in the back of their minds. They won't even know why. That's all that's gonna happen. But no, I love that idea of making sure that the thoughtfulness that we put behind what we're doing and why we're doing it and what it says to that person and what we see in that person
Yeah,
as well. Wow,
yeah.
that's beautiful. Yeah.
I think about my own experience, Josh, that being a psychiatrist was something that was kind of suggested to me first by my father and then by some other people who knew my dad's work as uh, a psychologist and affirming those gifts in me. And I think when we give a gift that affirms something we see, it could be an art set because we see, creativity in one of our nieces or nephews, or
Yeah.
could be a football because we have a little boy who loves to throw things.
Yeah.
Those gifts can really make a difference in um, the trajectory or the direction that we go. So anyway, I hadn't planned to think about that, but there it is.
I think that's dead on the money. I love that. I love that. What interesting insight. Want to remind you guys that there are so many great things that are happening in partnership and connection with Westcliffe. We want to thank Hidden Manna Ministries. I know they have some wonderful things going on. We talked a little bit about that last week. Do we have any updates in terms of Hidden Manna
So
goes?
we're taking 350 gift bags into the Walls unit. That will include books and Christian books and candy for the guys. We're also delivering gift bags to the Henley unit and to Plain State University. They're both Plain State Prison. They're both out by Dayton, both for women. And we did. We're still a bit short of what we need to finish up that ministry. So if you want to go to hiddenmanna.org, or I'm going to put up another little opportunity to give on Facebook if you'd like to be a part of that. It's the people in prison over the last 2 years with the pandemic have been sorely neglected, and so we want to let them
Mm.
know that we still care about them and we are mindful of their deprivation.
Love the work you guys are doing. Wow, that's awesome. Want to also just give a shout out to Christ the King, uh, where Tavares Linzer is worship leading. Thank you guys, Church of the King, excuse me, for their continued support of Tavares and his partnership with us here at Westcliffe Pilgrim Lutheran Church. I love you guys. We're having a good time together, marching through the Christmas story as well. And of course, Woodlands Church, thank you again for your continued partnership. Paul, with this in mind, would you mind closing us in a word of prayer this morning?
I'd love that. And I also want to remind people that if you want to go on Facebook to Westcliffe page, you'll get to see the videos that are posted each week, or you can go to westcliffe.org, which is our ministry website. We'd love for you to partake of all the good that's there. And if you want to support these videos and this podcast, that's your avenue to do that. So let's
Love it.
pray.
Love it.
God, we thank you so much. You are the one that is is our gift. James, the brother of Jesus, reminds us that every good gift, every perfect gift comes from above, the Father of lights, in whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. But even when the days are the darkest, you are the Father of lights, and you bring light to our darkness. God, as we look to you at this time of year, show up for us afresh as you did 2,000 years ago in
Mm.
the little town of Bethlehem, bringing the light of the world, the bread of the world, the one who will save us and heal us and rule us. We thank you for Jesus as our priest, our healer, and our king. And it's in his name we give you glory and offer all of our expectations and desires to you. Bless each of us as we look to you this Christmas. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. We love you guys. Have a blessed Christmas season. Bye.
Bye.